Welcome to Emran's podcast, episode number 125. This is the host, Suman Silwal. As you may have noticed that Emran's podcast format changed just a little bit. Since I'm heavily training, I'm taking you through the experience and then also adding a couple of other things in the audio formats that I do. Hopefully you enjoyed those kind of formats. Also, we'll continue bring the interview as I get to talk to our fellow runners and local, regional, and national guests. This episode, I talked to Beau Talley. He's a local runner here around Birmingham, but he just finished Western State. Enjoy the podcast and continue listening to Emran's podcast and support. Please do like Marathon Runs page, follow the Instagram, and also I do have an Ultra Runs page as well. Please do follow and continue your support. Enjoy the podcast. I would like to welcome Beau Talley to Emran's podcast. Beau, how you doing today?
Doing great.
So have you recovered from Western State?
Yeah, for the most part. Kind of a rule of thumb, I'll rest about 1 day for every 10 miles of a long run like that. So actually today was the 10th day. Yeah, it's coming along good.
Back in days whenever I first started running, the rule of thumb was 1 day per mile. So that was...
That's you out of running for quite a while.
Yeah, I think that only applied for marathon running. So, it's a little different for ultra marathoner, I guess.
As I've gotten older, that seems to work for me. I don't know. Some of these young people roll out of the car and do 100 miles and they're ready to go again tomorrow. But that's in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Beau, you and I, we run pretty much a similar circle here in around Birmingham area. We had a 5 showing up at Western State from Alabama. We had a drought 2018, 2019. We had a pretty big crowd. You're the one of the finishers, so congratulations for that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was definitely a bucket list check off for me personally. Like everyone, I had some goals going into the run. The race didn't quite go like I would have liked. It didn't get the finish that I would like. But there's not one other part of it that I would change. It was the high point of my running career so far.
Definitely. Before we dig deep in Western State, that's where we'll talk a little bit deeper. Let's talk about your running journey. You, like I said earlier, you and I were running from pretty much similar circuit. I remember you and I were running Pinhoti a couple of years ago, and there was one guy following me behind me for miles and miles, and I was suffering. And then later on, I realized it was you because you ran out of headlamp and you were just kind of catching up my light. So I remember that. I think it's 2015 Pinhoti.
Yes.
But tell us about your running journey. How did you end up at the Western State? Briefly tell us about that.
Kind of a bizarre story. I like most kids in the South, I was active, Little League, high school sports, that type thing. I went to a small rural school, track, and those types of things were not even an option. Picked up a little bit I got into weight training and things like that. And about 13, 14 years ago, had a lady at work right around the first of the year, said, we ought to get a group at work and run the Mercedes 5K. And I did some weight training, thought that, that won't be bad. It'll be fun, be something a little bit different past a Saturday morning. Did it, enjoyed it. And for me personally, I've always been kind of a middle of the pack runner. And so I have to find some satisfaction in the competition with myself. And I found that in that little 5K run. I thought, I could do better than that. And so I thought, well, I'll just include a little bit of running into my weight training. And sort of the old proverbial, the rest is history. The 5K turned into the 10K, the 10K into the half marathon. Did a marathon. Actually, it was the Mercedes. I came around Avondale Park, the Butts group, which was actually pre-Butts at that time. But Kyle Sticknoff and some of the others, the founders were there, and other people at that time that I did not even know. And they were hooping and hollering and having a good time. And I don't even remember who it was, but somebody said, "Hey, would you like a beer?" And I said, "Sure, I'll have a beer." And he handed me a Dixie cup. And I said, "Can I have the whole can?" And they said, "Sure, you can." And they ran down to the curb with me, cheering and what have you. And they said, "Hey, you need to get with us. We need to do, you might like trail running." And that really, not knowing any of those individuals, that's where it all started. At that point, I had only done a couple of marathons, and I immediately made some connections with other trail runners, started into the 50Ks, and the 50K led to the 50 mile, the 50 mile to the 100K to the 100 mile. That's kind of where I am today. And oddly enough, as fate would have it, Kyle and John Gregg, two of the three founders of Butts, were two of the people who went to pace me during Western States. So kind of a strange way that everything came full circle for me.
Definitely. Sound like you had a great journey to get to start line of Western State. So tell us about your ultra marathon journey. Seems like you went from marathon to ultra marathon. Do you do mostly ultra marathon? I remember, like I said earlier, we ran 100 mile together. How many 100 mile have you done so far? How does the ultra world look like for you?
Well, for me, I only have 600 mile finishes. I don't have many DNFs, thank goodness, but I did drop at Bighorn, and so that's the only 100 that I've dropped in. I'm trying to do a couple of hundreds per year, and I mentioned earlier that this was a bucket list checkoff. I personally have 3 bucket list runs, and it's a mixture of road and trail. I want to do Boston. I do more training on the road for pure convenience. My work schedule has me at work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I have a lot of other vices, hunting and fishing and things I like to do outside. So I don't really want to spend every weekend with a long run. So I do more road running. So I want to do Boston. This is in no particular order, but I want to do Boston. I want to do Western States, now checked off. And I'm like every other hardcore long-distance ultra person, I'd love to do hard rock. I don't know if that's reality or not. It seems I only know of one individual from the area that's ever even had a chance to run it. So in my hundreds, I try to choose those qualifiers that will at least keep me in the mix or in the lottery for Western States and hard rock. Other than that, I'll just try to pick something that's scenic, and maybe my wife does like to run, but not the long stuff. So we'll try to make runcations out of some of these longer events, something that she can enjoy as well.
Definitely. How far do you have you traveled? I mean, you just came from California, but for your races, do you try to go nationally, internationally? What kind of run do you do?
I've not ran internationally before. I have ran, but just goofing around internationally. But most of the, Pinoti, I've been to Wyoming, Colorado, Washington State, in that area. Again, for me, I try to be a solid middle of the pack and an upper age group runner, that I try to pick something that I think I'm really going to enjoy and not just be a chore to get that qualifier for the various lotteries that there may be. More and more of I'll call them better runs are going to a lottery. It seems like the more popular that the runs get, that they are starting to see more and more of them go to a lottery. So you really have to start paying attention to the lottery list. Western States, they do provide a list of runs that's listed on their website that you have to run one of those events. You can't just pick any 100 that you choose. You have to run one of those to qualify to get into the lottery.
Definitely. Pinhoti here locally is Western State qualifier.
Yes, it is. And I ran into quite a few people as we were talking on the trail from all over the country who, when they would hear that, we'd ask, each other, where are you from, chit chat. When I would say Alabama, there were more than a few that said, oh yeah, I've come down and ran Pinhoti. They really enjoyed it. They respect the run, and so we have a good representation in that 100-mile world with Pinhoti.
Definitely, yeah. But talking about running a 100-miler, I'm limited to 100-miler a year now. Family has put a restriction in the amount of suffering I've gone through the last couple of 100 miles, but last few actually now. So apparently every 100 mile I run becoming a battle. So talking about that, how was your 100 mile look like? Have you talked about age a little bit, but how was your 100 mile as you have started since, when did you do your first 100?
I don't know the specific year, but probably 6 or 7 years ago. The first one that I did was Thunder Rock, which is not even, there's discussion of it coming back. I think it ran 2 years or 3. There's some permitting issues and I don't know, some conflict in management and what have you. But I think it's a run that they're trying to get to come back. But yeah, that was the first one that I did. And then Pinotti was the second one that I had done. What I found in this kind of sounds strange as an older runner. I'm 57, by the way. The older that I get, the smarter that I get, a little more savvy that I get. I begin to figure a few things out, although certainly I continue to make mistakes that I learn from. But I've continued to get faster and become a better runner, particularly at the lesser distances than the 100. But even at the 100 distance, I have found that if I run more, I run better at those distances. If I had the time, I believe, to really log twice the miles, I believe I would be significantly better. And I pretty much developed a regimen of weight training and things like that work for me. I don't have any ailments. I rarely have any injuries. And I'm knocking on the kitchen table as we speak. And it's been good for me. I think that, in fact, I have sitting here on the table, I've been working on the last couple of days, looking at next year already and trying to maybe squeak in 3 or 4 100s next year just to see, will my body respond to doing the longer distances? Would it get used to doing that?
Yeah. So you mentioned about that. I mean, training and the way you have doing. It's not a guarantee. So as I can tell you, and I trained really hard for Lake Martin, and the result didn't show that amount of training I put in. So once you line up for 100 mile, just for listeners, if you have never run 100, that's one thing for sure. You never guarantee how you were going to perform. So many things can happen. So running 100. Yeah,
that's absolutely. I trained because this was a bucket list, and the lottery is in the late part of the year, late November, 1st of December, I believe. And so well in advance, 6 or 7 months in advance, that the race is coming, that you're in. And so I ate better than I've ever eaten. I trained harder than I've ever trained. And I was, confident of a much faster race than I ended up with. And even had a plan B that, hey, if the stars lined up at 55 or 62 miles, I was going to make a run at a sub 24. Of course, the weather was great this year. It was cooler than normal, but we had snow for the first 8 of the first 10 miles. I'm talking deep snow that, people were falling and sliding around. And, there were a couple of sections that I just sat on my rear end and slid down 20 or 30 feet down a slope just to get to dirt and run. So, that slowed me down. And I couldn't get my iPod to sync up. And so, I'm frustrated and tinkering with that. All those little things that you think you have all worked out, sometimes it just doesn't work out.
Definitely.
That's part of it.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. And I've gone through it too many times now. So let's, since you brought it up and we kind of headed that way anyway, let's talk about the Western State. So this is 2019 Western State. Tell us about how did you qualify for that one? Let's start from there.
Well, my qualifying race, I used the Yeti 100, my first and only sub 24 hour 100 is run in Abingdon, Virginia, put on by the Yeti Trail Runners out of Georgia, right outside of Atlanta, and used that as my qualifier. I got in the lottery. I had 5 years worth of tickets to get in, and for those that don't know, there's a multiplier. First year's 1 ticket, second year's 2 tickets, third year's 4 tickets, fourth year's, do the math. It just keeps doubling. And so I had 5 years of tickets in. We had a group. We've been trying to do this for the past few years, that we'll just get a group of people, anybody that wants to get together, bring your laptops, bring your iPad, iPhone, whatever, and we'll pull it up online and watch the lottery and see if anyone from Alabama, and more specifically Birmingham, if we get in. So this year we were at Back 40. We've done it at Cahaba. We've done it at Ghost Train. But this year it was at Back 40. And we probably had, 15 or 20 people maybe there. Most were in the lottery. Some were not in the lottery, but just wanting to hang out with their friends. And, I don't know exactly the point. I want to say that I was, say, 37th or so person that was drawn. I'd actually got up to get another beer. I didn't even hear it. And someone says, "Hey, you're in." And, the beers were flowing, and it was exciting. And I thought, well, wow, I'm in this quick. It's kind of surreal. Really didn't sink in. I didn't know what to say. All these years, you don't get in, you don't get in, you don't get in. You just think you're not going to get in, but it's just a good reason to go home. It's kind of like a Super Bowl party. It's good, a good reason to eat some hot wings and pizza. And, it was exciting. It was kind of disappointing for your friends when you see that they didn't get in and, they wanted to be, in that mix. I will say, having said that we have quite a few this year, people that are on up into the 32 plus number of tickets. So I think that this year we'll have another multiple group of people that will get into the run. So we'll have to wait and see. But, so I get in the lottery. I trained harder than I've ever trained. My wife, Shelley, was my crew chief, and I had let me back up and say this. I just can't say enough about the friendships and things that have come about from running. That day that I ran around by Avondale Park, not knowing any of those people that were there and sharing a cold beer down to the corner of the block, two of those guys end up going. I got drawn that day at Back 40 in the lottery, and before I can even say anything, they say to me, "Hey, we're going to Western States." I'm thinking, hey, I don't know that I can pay everybody's way to get to Western States, and they're like, "No, we're going. We're going to be there, and we're going to do whatever we have to do to get you through this." And that's exactly what they did. Just incredible friendships that would have never happened had I not gotten involved with butts in particular, but trail running in general. So anyway, I jump ahead. So we, start lining up immediately all our accommodations, and my wife and I flew out a couple of days early, made a little couple of day trip through Yosemite, took it easy, no crazy hikes or anything like that, but did a little sightseeing. And then Kyle and John Gregg and Michael Atkins, they were the three that wanted to go and help me. We picked them up at the Reno airport the next day. We headed over to Squaw Valley. I had rented a little chalet there that was, totally, I can't say that I was so smart to do this, but it just worked out. We were about 100 yards from the start line. And so literally I walked to the sign-in session where you go in and they get all your info, take your picture. You can do a little shopping for Western States apparel. You get your swag bag and your shirts and all the things that you pick up. And then you go to the expo, which was just, I don't know how you feel about these things, but you go to these trail runs and they're great and they're wonderful, and oftentimes they're in rural areas, and you go and you get your socks that don't fit from the local running store. They brought all smalls and extra larges, and you get your 50 cents off at the Dollar General coupon and maybe some free granola from Publix or something, and you're ready to go. This was an expo. There's Sunto, Cliff, Goo, Ultra, Garmin, all hardcore running with real people, real reps, some name runners that are represented by those people there, giving away their hats, giving away their glasses, giving away their things that you normally would have to pay for, all the Cliff and Goo and squirrel nut butter that you could ever want. You could just load your bag down with it. Everybody so serious. Everybody's having a great time, but this was hardcore pure trail running overdrive.
So you get in there, it's like, wow, this is, it's like
over the top. They give 100, there's 369 runners, 69 runners. They give 100 slots to the elite, the people that are making a living running, or the invitees. The other 200 and some odd runners come from the lottery. So you've got 300 something runners to run through that all have to go through that process. And it was pleasant. It was steady. It was moving. It was engaging. And yet, you never felt stalled. You never felt like I'm never going to get through this. It was like, they just so fine-tuned it over the 45 years that they've run this thing of recent. And so, you ran through that process, and then I thought, okay, well, I don't have my bib. I don't have my bib. And they said, oh, you get your bib tomorrow. I thought, oh, what a disaster that's going to be. 369 people trying to get out here to get a bib on race morning. It took about 15 seconds. They were so fine-tuned with the numbers and alphabetically, and the people just walked up, boom, you got your bib, you got everything the way you needed it. And being 100 yards or so from the start line, I literally went back to the room before the race started and went, got my bib pinned on and did my last little gear check and made sure everything was the way that I liked it. And then we all walked as a group, my pacers and everything. They had to get bibs as well. They got those the day before. And we all walked to the start line, and they had a little, few positive words being said, very motivational. And then, there's a countdown. Everybody counts down from 10, and then boom, you're off. Just an incredible experience. Hundreds and hundreds of people on each side at 5 in the morning. The sun has not come up yet. They're lined up on the side of this mountain, and just an awesome start to an awesome time.
Before we go deep on this one too, just tell us a little bit more on your training. A lot of you kind of jumped ahead on this to get to the start, to line up to the start. You mentioned about your training. Some of the listener would like to know, how did you train for Western State? The terrain, the weather, the change of weather. Like you said, there's some places you have snow, and the other place you are hot, and it's such
training. I personally follow a regimen that I just adapt either from the 50K to the 100-mile. I have a base running plan, and it's 6 days a week of running. Every week there is a speed day. Every week there is a tempo day. Every other week there is a long run. And so, I just start with the race date. For me personally, I like to have about a 2-week taper. The 3-week drives me insane. So I try to go a 2-week taper. And then I just back those numbers out from there. It's pretty simple. Just sit down with a blank calendar and back it out. And so I know the day I need to start, and I know the day that I'm going to finish. I mentioned earlier that I have a lot of other things I like to do. So for me personally, I don't want to run all the time, all day, every day, and particularly Saturday and Sunday, running all day. So I have found for me that the back-to-back or the back-to-back-to-back or the back-to-back-to-back-to-back, doing things like that have helped me. I started doing it's a local gym that started up in town called F45. It's a functional training that's somewhere I would call it a crossover between a CrossFit and some type of synergistic exercise class. And I started doing that 2 to 3 days a week. I would run in the morning, do that in the evening. So I would double up on that. And all the classes are 45 minutes. So I was getting some strength and cardio in that in a short session. And then I was getting my runs consistently in. I ramped my miles up, and on peak week was right at 70 miles. I had a couple of weeks of 60 and a week of 70. But most of the others were in the 40 to 50 miles, just generally speaking. I used a 16-week training plan, which is really long for me personally, but it was really I really eased into it for that first 4 weeks or so. So that wasn't a very big deal. And, I've tried more and more the older I've gotten to pay attention to what I eat, what have you. Now, I'm not one of these people that's counting my macros and every little jot and tittle that I eat, but I do have a certain number as far as protein and carbs and fats that I try to eat. And I generally try to stay around that. And then that last 30 days, as you start to really focus on the race, I start really focusing on what I'm eating, and it tends to give me a little more intensity and a little more drive that, hey, we're fine tuning, we're sharpening the pencil and getting ready for the big day.
Definitely talking about the big day. When I'm getting ready to line up for a big race like this, especially so much invested on the event, I tend to back out from doing anything leading up to the race. Were you any concern, worried about anything injuries wise or not making it there or anything like that? Because usually that's one of my biggest worry. So I usually like to look at it like, okay, now I'm going to stop running and let just whatever plays, because when I travel so far or getting ready to travel so far, I don't want to get injured. How like I said, you said 2 weeks earlier, did you start to back out a little bit and slow it down? How did that work?
3 weeks out, I stopped all of the F40, we'll just call it cross training. I stopped all the cross training. 3 weeks out, I continued to run. And then that 2 weeks out, I backed my running back off. I think I did about maybe 30 miles that week. And then the week of the run, I only ran about 15 miles that week leading up. And then I traveled on Wednesday. I did no running. Thursday, no running. Friday, no running. And then towed the line on Saturday morning. So the 3 days there of nothing but, some little hiking. We had went to Yosemite. And so that was also part of the plan too, that I got some 2 and 3 mile walks in, hikes around, no giant climbs or anything like that. And those months leading up to the race, I certainly, I picked some runs to do. I did at least a 50K or 50 mile each month I run, but I didn't try to, break my neck or anything on any of those runs. I tried to treat them as a paid training run and to be out on the trail and, just work on mechanics and things and equipment and what have you, and things like that. But, I made a conscious effort that we weren't going to do anything foolish, to sustain maybe an injury or something like that with so much on the line.
Definitely. Talk about one more thing before we talk about the race itself. So tell us about, was there anything or is there anything you'll change looking back now? You finished the race and, you got the buckle now. Will you change anything or would you change anything if you look back looking at your training, preparation leading up to the race? Was there anything you wanted to do differently than however you prepare, or would you stay the same?
For me, I felt 100% more trained than I've ever been. I personally wouldn't change anything. I'm a very stiff individual, and I've always had to battle flexibility. I might work a little bit more on my flexibility because I think that lends to greater speed. My other thing that mentally took a little bit of toll on me was I had looked at the elevation profile before I went, and there's 3 big climbs. They're both, generally speaking, 3 miles. Some are a little short of that, some are a little over. 3 big climbs in the run. And I thought, okay, hey, we'll get these 3 big climbs out of the way, and that'll get us to roughly 55 miles. And then, I looked at the elevation and I thought, those bunch of little squiggles on there, it didn't look like it was a whole lot. And then I got to the race and got to that point and thought, okay, we can really make some time now. We're on this little easy part, and I'm using some air quotes there. And it turned out to be a relentless wave of small but steep climbs. And so, I found myself, I would make really good time on the flatter section or on the downhill, and then boom, we'd hit a hill, and next thing you know, we're power hiking again. And of course that, when you averaged it out, kind of zapped your overall time. And that was just relentless from that time moving forward. I probably no less than 25 times during the run and I'm generally not a complainer, said, I'm done with these 100-milers. This is, used a little gentle profanity and said, I'm done with it. These waves of hills is ridiculous. But, I tried to read as many race reports as I could. And Kyle had ran, of course, he was just with me in one leg of that latter part. But, he had ran it several years ago, and he had a fair recollection of the race, but he didn't remember everything. I probably wouldn't remember any of it. So, maybe he would say, okay, I think we got a little flat section right here, and then it's going to be downhill. Well, then it'd be a flat section and another hill. I think, oh, my goodness, another hill. And that really wore me down. I thought while I was running, and I went even into the race saying, I just want to do this one time, check it off the list and done. I was so impressed with the run. I loved everything about it, and I cannot wait to be back in the lottery to try to run it again. Now that I know what I know about the race, I'm confident that I could have a far better outcome time-wise. I couldn't have a better time than this year, but just, race time, I could do it better.
Definitely. Yeah, it's like sounded like it's like a running Pinhoti here.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have never run a Pinhoti, you look at this two big mountains that you have to look at. If you look at the profile, it's like, oh yeah, no problem. Then you come here and you try to run that thing, and it's like, yeah, there's a lot more hill than.
Oh yeah. And if you generally, relatively speaking, the second half is easier than the first half. Yeah. It doesn't have 3 big climbs. It's got 100 smaller quarter-mile climbs, half-mile. You've got a lot of those in it. And it does have some more runnable sections, but it does have this relentless wave of smaller hills that if you're not mentally prepared for that, it really can wear you down.
Yeah, sounds like you're saying that be ready for those smaller hills. Forget about bigger hills. We're all ready, but be ready for them, definitely. Yeah. In running, maybe here in for our Birmingham terminology, probably run yellow multiple times back and forth, up and down.
Yeah, absolutely. It's steep. It's a lot of those big climbs are steep, switchbacks. Well, the first climb is just straight up. It's up in a ski escarpment. It's just a 3.5 mile straight as an arrow up and over the mountain. But the other big climbs are just numerous switchbacks that are just steadily going up. That would be the thing. You couldn't get enough hill training in, and not just power hiking, but trying to actually do some running on some of those. I know that's something that I've tried to do, is become a better hill runner, not just hiker. Can't do enough of that.
Definitely. Let's get a little bit more deeper. You talked already so much about Western State, course, and a lot of things about already. Just kind of give us about your overall going from the start to finish. It's 100 miles. We cannot sit here. It'll be hours and hours.
Oh, sure.
So talk about that. But give us some of the highlight. I know that the earlier you talked about the sliding through the ice and snow. I know it takes a lot of toll on a lot of people really at the beginning going through the ice, because I think Western State does not allow any kind of pole or anything like that. So give us some highlight.
So 3.5 miles up the ski escarpment, basically in your mind is like where a ski lift was. You're going up something like that. Got up near the top, which it peaks out just a little under 9,000 feet, and you get there. There's snow. That wasn't too bad, really, at that point. The snow was not like our snow where it was gushy and mushy. It had a little crust of ice on it. So they actually had weeks before. They'd send you, 3 or 4 pre-race updates. And probably 3 weeks before, they had sent some photos of one of the more popular aid station called Robinson Flat. It's at the 30-mile mark. This year was the first. It's the first spot that your crew can see you. And they sent some pictures out, and all you could see was the top on the outhouse. The snow was that deep. And then they went into a 90 to 100 degree. Yeah, it's crazy. Snow that deep, 90 to 100 degree heat wave.
Wow.
And they had sent us notification that they may have to alter the course to go around some of the snow. And so, you've waited all this time to get in. You want to do the real deal run. So, I was hopeful that it would work out. And it did. The snow literally melted about 8 feet in sections to where they at least could work it around to where people could get in and out of the outhouse and what have you. So we make the first climb. You go through the snow. I don't know how much people have read about this. There was a blind runner being led by Scott Jurek. His name's Kyle Robideau. He got into the snow and had to actually drop at that point. He could not be guided through the ice and the snow for fear of safety, and he was just so slow to go through it. It was just so tedious moving through that section. I actually came into the first aid station a little less than an hour behind what I'd hoped to be because of that. And then you got, a couple of the big climbs. You come up to 30 miles. And as you're coming down from that higher altitude, the snow begins to go away and you'll see a patch here and a patch there. And then you begin to get more into you're still running on some ridges, but they're lower ridge lines. The snow is gone. And it's just like you went into a different biosphere. It's very dry out there during this month, despite all that snow. And it was quite a bit of dust. In fact, that dust took its toll on more than a handful of people. You're dirty, your legs are dirty. But the air is dry, so you're not pouring sweat. Everything's evaporating. And we rock on through 30, and the trails was nice, clean, single track. And then I came to realize these sections where you would get a long downhill, and then you would look across and see another ridge top. And you knew it was going to take you right to the bottom, cross a creek, and then right back to the top. And that's where that relentless type thing happened. So that goes through, in Western states, you can't pick up a pacer until mile 55. If you get in there before 8, you can't have a pacer till 62. If you get into 55 after 8, you can pick your pacer up there. So you can't see anyone for the most part to assist you as far as pacing until those times. This is the first race that I've ever used pacers during the run. I generally run solo. I said before, I'm a middle of the pack guy, and if I'm going to have competition with myself and with other people my age, I just like to pull out the true grit. And when I say that I did the 100, I did the 100. This one, as you mentioned earlier, you get in the biggest run of your life and you've got friends flying out and you spend thousands of dollars that you would never spend on a run routinely. It puts a premium on let's get this done and let's make sure it happens. And so, I had the pacers and I was using them, and I told them, just don't involve me in your decision making. Just be there when I need you, and let's get this done. And we did that just like clockwork. We worked our way through. All the aid stations are uniform and consistent with what they have, and they were more than plentiful. I thought this was kind of a cool thing. Everybody's bib has your name on it. And more than one time, I would come into an aid station, and this wasn't every aid station, but most of them, they have so much help that's part of this race. You would come in and they would say, Beau, what do you need? And I was thinking, like, how do I know you? How do you know who I am? Then I realized later that, hey, my name's on the bib. But they would come in and one individual would help you. They would get your water, get your tailwind, get your food, get you situated. If you need your shoe tied, something out of your pack, whatever you needed, they were there to help you, and then they sent you off. A second super cool thing was, there were a lot of elite runners that, whatever their circuit or their cycle or their sponsors tell them what they're going to run. So there were a lot of elite runners out on the course. I came through at about mile 70 some odd, and Hal Corners at the aid station, and he's, hey, Beau, yeah, you're doing great, patting you on the back and telling me what's up ahead. It was just incredible. You've got Gordy is out there, the founding runner of this run, making some chiropractic adjustments on people at one of the aid stations. And then at the finish line, he's coming around giving you just on his own personal congratulations to the run and chit-chatting. It's just an awesome experience. The run means so much to the people of Auburn, which is where the race ends. As you get into the last 10 miles or so, people are coming from the city. They're starting to get out onto the trails. You come into the last aid station, and it actually finishes up on a little road section in a neighborhood, and the people are out like a Kentucky Derby party with their tents and their drinks and their chairs out, and they know what you've done, and they know your pace, and they know your time. They're invested in this thing, and they're cheering you that mile, 1.3 miles, all the way to the stadium. And then you make your lap, much like Pinotti, inside the stadium to the finish line. And it's just, stadium is full of people. It's just an awesome, beyond my comprehension experience.
What a way to take us through start to finish. That's incredible. Sounds like I can't even imagine. For us as a point-to-point here, like we've been talking about many times up in Hody, sounds like it's a similar distance, but a much different experience. Tell us about throughout this race. What was the hardest part for you? Going through. You mentioned that earlier that you didn't get the race that you wanted, but hey, you got the buckle. Tell us about it. What was the hardest part?
Yeah. I had 3 goals, and I think a lot of people do this. Number 1 goal, finish the race, get the buckle. Number 2, have a realistic pace and time that you think you'll get, and then thirdly, if everything went perfect, here's what will happen. Those kinds of things. I've yet to have that run in the years that I've been running now, to where everything happens perfectly. You mentioned something earlier. It never goes perfect. This year the weather was great, but we had the snow. I got behind on some aid stations, on some cutoffs. And the way that Western States does, like many runs, the aid stations are a little bit tighter in the first half of the race. I think, they know that everyone's not going to make it. And so gently, they respect the effort that everyone's made to get there, and they want you to have a great experience. But they have to be safe, and there has to be an end to everything. And so the cutoffs are a little bit tight till you get to 55 or so miles. And so, you really gotta stay ahead of it. And once I got behind, I was running about 30, 40 minutes ahead of cutoffs. I'd hoped to be hours ahead of cutoffs. And so, fiddling with some of those things that didn't go right, and I had a plan to change shoes at 30 miles. I wore some shoes that were about a half size smaller than I normally wear. I had ran in them in a 50K and a 50 miles, so it wasn't like I just took them out of the box. But I had not run 100 miles in them. And so I get to my 55 and I pick up some pacer, and I'm wanting to change shoes. And of course, they're concerned for me, like, hey, I don't want to cut this thing too close. Let's go. And I don't want to be argumentative. I'm tired. My feet, though, were trashed, and I could tell that, I was having my toes had been hitting the end, and I knew that feeling that there was going to be some toenail loss. And so I was beginning to get some hot spots. I made that rookie mistake. I should have just wore shoes that I knew I could make the whole time, or taken the 5 minutes to fix the problem. That's something I really tried to work on as I've gotten more experienced, even though I didn't do it, is when you realize there's a problem, take the time and fix it before it becomes a real problem. Hot spot on your feet, blister, chafing, whatever the case may be. It's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. So it's best to just take the time and get it right. So those little things added up, and, just nickel and dime my time. And then by the end, my feet were so sore. The steep downhills, which I normally do best on, I was, it's like walking on glass. So that really was a painful experience. And so, those few little things I learned from that. I knew better. Should have just done it. Didn't. And, I'll know next time. That won't ever happen to me again.
Well, that's what you say now, but
Yeah. Well, that'll be something else,
Yeah, that'll be something else. Yeah, one thing I definitely like to point out to our listener, if you haven't done 100, or you've done 100 but you still don't know, like what Beau said, when things start going bad, you'll go bad. You rather try to fix it before it gets too bad. I had that problem, the safing issue, 2017 Pinhoti, and it got bad to worse. To virtually I could not move, and that wasn't like my first time I ever had that kind of issue. I mean, now I know how to deal with it, but still, man, that's difficult once you go downhill and you still have miles and miles to go, so it sounds like a very painful experience. So talking about also on the course, your diet, your food intake, how's like in the Western State, whenever you said the aid station is fully stocked. Tell us a little bit about the aid station experience there.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mentioned the personalized service at most of the aid stations. Not all of them. Some of the aid stations, would go, like I say, the first big aid station, there was a smaller one in between, but you would go 5 to 7 miles pretty consistently between aid stations. And 7 miles is not that big a deal unless one of those 3.5 mile hills is in there and you're power hiking for an hour doing that. That can, then you get up and you've got 3.5 miles to run. I personally use Tailwind, and I carry Tailwind in one bottle, a 15-ounce bottle, and water in the other. And so I personally like to drink. I'm a fast enough runner that I can get 5-6 miles in an hour if I don't have a 3.5 mile hill to power hike up. So, there was, I really had to stretch some things as far as that was concerned, but it really didn't bother me. I'm not so hung up on being that I have to have every little drop and every little crumb of nutrition in those little times. Another one of those things, like you were saying, that it's not going to be perfect. Your timing is not going to be exact. You're not going to roll in there at every aid station and you've just taken that last sip of your nutrition, which using the Tailwind is where I get most of that, and I use scratch, I choose, and I pretty much eat very little at the aid station, if anything. If I see something that I like, I'll get it. But they would have your variety of fruits, and they would have some vegetarian options, and they would have your usual M&Ms, gummies, pretzels, peanut butter, boiled potato, salt, pickles, pickle juice, Coke, real Coke, not Czech Cola, real Mountain Dew, not Lightning or whatever it is, and they would have Red Bull, and they would have ginger ale. And they would be just lined up in a row like race cups at the bar. This is kind of a silly little thing that I don't know why more runs don't do this. But, you hear about cupless races. They said this is a cupless race. So I had my little collapsible cup with me. I was prepared to do it. But every aid station, what they did is had little 6-ounce juice cups, hard plastic. The runner would get the drink out of the cup. Now, you couldn't walk down the trail with it. But you would get your cup, take your drink, and then they had a sterilizing solution. They would just swish your cup in, rinse it in some water, dry it out. And they were just recycling those cups all day long.
That's how
So you didn't have any trash to pick up as far as cups were concerned. And yet every runner had a nice, steady cup to drink out of it. Now, you could sit there and refill your cup as many times as you wanted. You just couldn't walk down the trail with it.
Got it.
That was kind of a cool, neat thing.
That's a little thing, that little thing.
A little thing that, I talked to Kyle about that. Says, Butts needs to explore that in some of their runs because it's very effective getting trash on the trails and things like that. But those aid stations were very consistent like that. Water and I think they had Goo Brew was their drink at this particular race, and maybe they had some Tailwind at some. I carry Tailwind, so it didn't matter to me. This happens to a lot of people. About approaching 50 miles, always was just rocking along just fine, and then suddenly I thought, if I have to take another sip of Tailwind, I'm going to throw up. And the more I thought about it, not even drinking it, I started getting the dry heaves. And Once that passed, which was very quickly, just a short stop on the side of the trail, I felt immediately fine. And for the next 50-ish miles, I just said, I'm not going to drink any tailwind. I can't go through that. My stomach felt fine, but it was literally just the thought of anything. And I love tailwind and I'll continue to use it. But on that particular race, I just couldn't stand the thought of another electrolyte drink. And so every aid station, I had one of those cups of Mountain Dew and one cup of Red Bull. And that's all I had for the last 50 miles. And I had no problem whatsoever.
You were trained through it and with the one thing, and then you end up in a race, and then you had to switch back and trying to eat. It's just part of running 100. I've been through too many problems lately, so like I mentioned earlier. So, but let's talk about also. I was thinking your last few miles, and you went through day and night. Your legs are trashed. Now you're trying to get closer to finishes. Was there any doubt for you that you're not going to make it, or?
I have a lot of confidence in myself, and I knew my time was not what I wanted, but there was never a doubt that I was not going to finish. There was just too much on the line, I go back to, and I've never felt this in a run before, but, I've not sat down with a pen and paper and calculated the amount of money that I spent to go do the run. It's one thing when you're sitting around after a run or you're at the brewery, hey, I want to go to Western States, I want to go to Hard Rock, I want to go to wherever. And then, for me and my wife, it's, $800 for airfare. It's $350 for a rental car. It's $400 for fuel during that time. It's over $1,000 for Airbnb and the Squaw Valley. It's $365 to get in the run. We haven't eaten a thing at that point. And then you've got pacers, and you're trying to buy them beer. You're trying to buy them food. You're trying to do, you can drop $4 or $5 at the drop of a hat. You don't think about those things when you think about these big runs, but that is the way that it is. And then you find yourself, hey, I'm at Western States. Man, I got to have a $50 shirt and a $80 hoodie.
Definitely, yes.
I should do this because I'm never going to do this. I may never get back here again. And so then you start buying, hundreds of dollars worth of things, mementos to mark the occasion. And so, you easily can spend $3,000 to $5,000 easily.
Easily, yeah.
You have a few nice meals to celebrate and a few extra beers, and it's a big consideration. It's something that it's easy to hit that button on Ultra sign up. Say, hey, yeah, I'm in the lottery. When your name gets pulled, though, the rubber meets the road.
Definitely, yeah. We work hard to get that lottery and have a chance of winning the lottery, but this time you definitely have the investment. It's a once in a lifetime investment for a lot of us, So it's.
And let me say, I'm not bad mouthing it at all. It was worth every penny.
Yeah.
Every.
Yeah. I think the problem, the stress, where it comes from is if you don't finish it, then you got to come home empty-handed, and that's usually the stress, I guess. I've never, one of the things I mentioned in several other podcasts, that I've never traveled far away to run any ultra distance race. And farthest I have done is Georgia. So I don't. I've traveled around the world almost now to run a marathon, but not for ultra distance race. Don't know why, but that may be the reason why I have. I think one of my biggest problem is, I think we can talk about that too. After the race, it's like how, I can barely come from Lake Martin or Pinhoti, from Sylacauga to Birmingham, Lake Martin to Birmingham, or my house, coming across the country, going places. That's it's hard for me to think. But let's just talk about your the last few miles, coming to the finish line and holding that buckle. Let's talk about that, your whole experience.
Well, I'll tell you, I mentioned I had 3 pacers, Michael Atkins, John Gregg, and Kyle Sticknoth. Well, Michael did the first 6 or 7 miles, and then he did the last 6 or 7 miles. And Michael's a young runner that I guess maybe 2-3 years ago tops I went out with John Gregg and was going to just on a whim pace him for 30 miles at the I Am Tough. And then now he has fell in love with trail running. He's an excellent trail runner. He lives out in Boulder from Birmingham, moved there back here. He was so excited for me. That's just the kind of friendships that come out of this kind of thing. I was excited. He was excited. We were both excited. And he's telling me, man, you're going to get the buckle. We got it made. It's in the bank. We cross this section called No Hands Bridge. And that's where the people start having reasonable access that they could hike to there and walk from there from their car. Because it's only maybe a little over a mile up to that last aid station. And then, of course, there's a climb up to that aid station. And you get up that little short climb. You can hear them, the bells ringing and the clanging and the cowbells and whooping and hollering. And you get up to there. And, of course, at that point, there's a mile, 1.3, 1.2 miles to go. I didn't even need to stop. And, everybody's high-fiving you and patting you on your back. And they know you've made it. And then I thought this is so fitting for the race. So I had told Michael, I didn't have a problem. I mentioned that the sore feet and the downhill really killed me. But on the flat and on the other parts, I really could run pretty good. In fact, I look back at my Strava data, and I had some 9-minute miles, at the plus 90 mark. And I was, I felt pretty good on the flat stuff. I just couldn't do the downhill things. And then the power hiking, I was really tired. And so I told him, I said, when we get to the pavement, I had heard, you'll be on the pavement and it's just going to drop right off the hill down to the stadium. And so we hit the pavement, we were up a little hill, and it starts to drop down. So as we're going up there, I said, look, we're just going to get to the top of this hill, and we're going to start chugging, and we're going to go as fast as we can get to. It'll be like NASCAR. It may take a little bit to get up to full speed, but we're going to come into that stadium, on fire. Well, we hit the top of the hill, and we start chugging down, and I look ahead, and I think, that looks like a turn just ahead. And we get ahead of steam up, and I turn, and dang it, if there's not another hill. And so, oh, man, a little more profanity. And then we hike. I said, let's just hike up this hill. This surely is the last one. We hike to the top. And then, of course, the people are saying, it's straight downhill to the finish line. And I actually could see the corner of the football stadium. So I literally did know at that point that we were at the end, and we did just that. We just started going downhill, trying to get as much speed as possible. And we ran right into the stadium. And again, this is half of the stadium. They actually were renovated. Normally you come into the stadium and do just like Pinotti, do a little lap and then finish. They were resurfacing the inside of the football field. So part of the track was not accessible. So you actually had to go down the track and then loop back up and come around. So slightly different configuration with a normal finish at the same spot. And so we went down into that turnaround, wide open. And then I was able to maintain at that point, the pressure is completely off. You've done it. My wife was waiting at the finish, and I'd not got to see her very much during the run because of the pacing and everything else. And so she was a welcome sight. She had been a big part of everything, and she knew what all I had went through in the training. And, Kyle and them are filming me running down the side of that last stretch. And everybody was just elated and high-fiving and patting me on the back. It was just an awesome experience.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a great finish, strong finish. That's what we like to say. Did you get to jump at the end? Or
I didn't do any of the patent side kick, just a plain old stomp jump across the finish.
Yeah.
And it had begun to get pretty warm at that time. It's probably about 80 degrees, and I was just looking for some shade. I found the first spot that I thought I wouldn't get stepped on that was in the shade, and laid down and got all that gear off. Took my shoes off, let my poor feet get some air. Got a funny story. So a lot of medical people there, and whether you legitimately need it, they ask you, are you okay? Do you need anything? What have you? I said, no, I'm fine. I just want to rest here. And And my wife had come out to the track, and so I just want to rest. And so, will you come over here and get in the shade? Said, of course, John Gregg and all of them are there, and they say, well, you just come, you just lay down in the medical tent. And so my concerned pacers say, "No, you're not going to take him to the hospital, are you? We got beer to drink tonight." And they said, "No, we're not taking him to the hospital." And so I said, "Okay, well, that's cool. I'll go lay down in the medical tent." So went and laid down on a cot, and it was great. I could just laid in there, and little kids are running around there with ice cream and popsicles and what have you. And so got a little physician care on my feet while I ate a drumstick and looking at that buckle. And you get a little finisher award, go around your neck. And so that was cool. And then everybody gets under a giant, like a revival tent, and everybody from the beginning to the end, they call your name, you come down, and in that lag time, as the people have finished, they get your buckle. They're all the buckles, the 360-something buckles are on boards under this tent, and your name has been engraved on the back, customized date on it. And so they start at the top and call everybody, here's so-and-so from this town, and you come down, and everybody from Jim Wamsley to the last person to cross the line is cheering people on all the way to the end.
Wow.
So it was really I hate to use a word repetitively, but I don't know what's better than awesome. It was just an incredible experience that I wish everyone could experience. I'm ready to be back in the mix to do it again.
Definitely sounds like a great experience and a great achievement itself. Thinking about for you to top it off, what are we discussing right now? Tell us about one experience you had that's awesome, that changed. You felt like things changed in your mind totally about running ultra, being where you are now. Maybe crossing the finish line, maybe holding that buckle, maybe middle of the night, something that triggered you, saying, "Wow, this is who I am." Can you give us some experience?
A lot of people say that this race doesn't start till Michigan Bluff or Forest Hill, which is some of those later where you can pick up the pacers. I think when I got to 30 miles, and when I got to the 30-mile mark, and I was not really where I wanted to be, but I was ahead of enough, and I had enough confidence in myself. I thought, hey, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get done with this, and this is a killer experience, and I just knew at that point it was going to work, but it was about also at that point that I said, we better, I don't know about goal B and C happening, but this first goal of finishing is going to happen. I don't know, at that point, I just knew, I just felt it at that time. It's the first time I could see the wife and the crew and watching the watch, and just knew that it was going to happen. And being in that element, and you could see, you already had felt the streamlined effectiveness and efficiency of the race and the support of all the people. I felt like if I didn't finish, I may let down people I didn't even know. They kind of make you feel like you really are an elite person. I know I'm not. I'm just saying that just the feeling.
Just the feeling, definitely.
It made you feel important. Even if you were the last person that finished on that, you felt, even if you didn't finish, just being there, you felt like you had really made an achievement and then they made that point in several of the speeches that you heard and things like that were said at different times. Just being there was an accomplishment. And I think, maybe for the first time it really soaked in. That's true. Doing what I had to do to get there. All those people that doing what they had to do to get to that point. That is an accomplishment in and of itself.
Definitely. Sounds like a reward for all your hard work. To be ultra runner, almost like what we say whenever we run at Boston. It's a victory lap for everything we have done to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, done to get to Boston, line up for that and get the Boston medal. I think it's a similar feeling in a different magnitude or different place. And it definitely sounds like a great experience. But it sounds like you had a great experience. Before we close this interview, we talked so much that I felt like we can go further forever. Before we close this interview, give us a words of advice to all the listener. I think you mentioned that several times as well. Give us words of advice to don't give a hope of one day to qualify and your name getting picked up to go to Western State, continue running those races and have a dream and about running the Western State. Give us those words of advice.
Well, certainly if running Western States or Hard Rock is on your list, certainly continue to look at the list. The list is not always the same. The list does rotate from year to year. And if you go to their website, you can see each year some races fall off, new races come about, and they apply to be a qualifier, because that's obviously a selling point as a race director. So stay on top of that. What I have done is try to identify, because there's only 6 or 7 of them, races that are dual qualifiers, so you can run one run and qualify for both Hard Rock and Western States. That's a smart thing to do, particularly if you're going to be traveling somewhere. That's just kind of a no-brainer. Rather than have to run 2 100s, you can run one and not get 2 birds with 1 stone. I also said this earlier. If things are going to go wrong, and before something becomes an issue, take care of it, whatever that is. Chafing, equipment, clothing, I don't know, whatever it may be. Check it out, make sure that it's all the way that it needs to be before you toe that line. Thirdly, probably maybe before that last point, whatever plan, there's different plans for different people. I'm a certified run coach, and I've been to some of those classes or to the classes to get that certification. And, one of the things you learn in that, there's no one plan that works for everyone. You got to do what's right for you. If you don't know what to do, get a run coach, go online, find a proven program that people have used for the 50K, the 100-mile, the 50-mile, whatever it is that you want to do. You can do it if you want to. Most of it's in your mind. If you physically train for it, the rest is all mental. If you have a desire to do it, you'll do it. Most people don't want to do 100 miles. They think you're crazy. And there's probably some truth to that. But if you want to do it, find a plan, believe in your plan, and follow the plan. And then that gives you the confidence, in my opinion, to go to these races, wherever it is, and to know I've done my part. I've done my training. And then rely on your training to get you to the point, to the end. Be smart in your running. The old adage, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Well, this is 4 marathons. So you need to really pace yourself, and not going out of the gate too fast. That's never more important than in a 100-miler. Because in the middle of the night, I think everyone has thoughts of their friends who are snuggled up in a warm bed somewhere while you're out running around, keeping your eye open for a cougar or a bear to bite your leg off, and think, why am I out here? So, get a plan. Get a coach, find something that's proven, stick with it, make adjustments when it's necessary, trust yourself. You can do it. You can do it if you put your mind to it.
Definitely. Sounds like great words of advice. So much deep in that. If you just listen to what Beau just said, that's pretty much what 100-miler most of us think about. Some of the things like, once you line up, keep moving forward, don't give up too quickly, because, running 100-mile is not easy, but it's doable. So definitely, thanks for your time, Beau. I had a great time talking to you, listening to your journey. Like I mentioned a minute ago, that we could talk forever. So thanks for your time, and we'll hope to hear more of your running story. And good luck for you going back to Western State next year.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of MRuns Podcast. Please visit mruns.com to listen to our previous podcast episodes, links to our social media channels, get race photos, get discount codes, and more.